but yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, let's start. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's having a great day. If you're not, tomorrow's the weekend, so that's something to look forward to. So welcome to our Blitzscaling Circles. It's our bi-weekly initiative organized in conjunction with our Scale Up Endeavor program. So this program is aimed to supercharge the growth of late-stage startup entrepreneurs. And in the call here today, we have, I can see that we have some of our scale-up companies, SmartPeep, Droppy, and some others. So today for the session itself, we are going to speak to Roland Ros, the founder of Philippines' fastest growing social media app, Kumu. Some of our previous sessions include speakers such as Chris Ye, the co-author of Blitzscaling, and Malaysia's first tech unicorn, Eric Chang, CEO and co-founder of Kasem, and last 2 weeks itself, we had Indonesia's most inspiring franchise leader, Hendy Setiano, founder and CEO of Baba Rafi Enterprise. If you missed out any of these sessions, feel free to check it out on our YouTube page. We will share it in the Zoom chat down below. And for today's session itself, as mentioned, we have Roland Ros with us today. So just a bit of background in terms of Kumu itself. So Kumu is a Pinoy community platform where you can just hang out, explore, and explore many live streams of the community, what community has to offer, and meet and chat with fellow Filipinos all around the world. Since its launch in 2018, Kumu became the first Filipino-founded app to be #1 highest grossing social app in the Philippines, #4 in Canada, #5 in Australia, #6 in Hong Kong, and top 10 in multiple markets according to App Annie. So prior to Kumu, Roland built a career as a growth engineer with a track record generating millions of customers for Fortune 500 and high growth tech companies in the United States. As we unpack Roland's scaling strategy today, we have the one and only Manny Ayala, Endeavor Managing Director of the Philippines, to moderate the session. But before we go into the session itself, if everyone can just turn on the video so we can take a group shot for our social media. Don't be shy, guys. Oh, I see, Sujan, you're driving. Be careful. 1, 2. Another 1, 2. Okay, thanks everyone. So I will pass the floor to Manny. Manny, the Zoom floor is yours.
Okay, well, I guess just to start us off, thank you very much, Endeavor Malaysia, for inviting us, lowly members of the Endeavor Philippines Network, to your wonderful show here. Terima kasih. So I first met Roland, gosh, Roland, 2018, right? 2018
Yes.
At a investor speed dating event that we were organizing for the Philippine community. And I don't know if you remember this, right? We were talking and you said, well, you know, Endeavor, it's cool, but I don't know if we're cool enough for Endeavor. Now, fast forward to 2021. I mean, you guys are on fire. You guys are completely disrupting the media landscape here. You guys have a number of firsts, including really the first Series B fundraising in the Philippines, right? So really the question we should be asking today is Endeavor cool enough for Kumu? So anyway, I thought we might spend the next 40 minutes with the following structure, if you don't mind, right? We'll talk about kind of your past, right? What got you here? The present, what are you sort of facing today in your entrepreneurial journey? And then the future, right? What does the next 5 to 10 years look like for you and for Kumu and for the rest of your team? Now, perhaps just to kick it off, maybe I'll ask you to do 2 things, right? First is briefly describe for our Malaysian audience what Kumu actually is or what it does, right? I think you have a very good kind of analogy to describe what Kumu is. So that's the first thing. The second is if you could share your origin story, right? Because you've had a really cool, interesting journey, right? So maybe if you could talk about how the various strands of your life came together to contribute to this thing we now call Kumu, right? So with that, take it away. What is Kumu?
Okay, great. Actually, I'll just consolidate it into one short so I could actually say both at the same time. And so basically, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. My mom I grew up in a single parent household, and growing up in Los Angeles, I'm Filipino American. So I didn't really know the Filipino side of my identity as much. And when I went to college, I had an opportunity to study in the Philippines in an exchange program. And so when I went to the Philippines, I fell in love with the Philippines. I knew in my heart that I felt more at home in the Philippines than I did in the US. And so I knew someday that after I graduated from college, that I would go back to the Philippines. And long story short, I had an opportunity. I accidentally became an entrepreneur. I helped grow a startup to becoming, having a successful exit. And with those resources, helping a performance marketing company grow to, quite a sizable exit. I was able to take those resources and go back to the Philippines, but mostly in humanitarian work and NGO work. So most of that work was clean water projects, anti-sex trafficking, HIV/AIDS work, poverty alleviation, and things like that. And I had a
that was like around 2012, right? Or between 2012, 2014?
Yeah, so 2010 was the exit. And so I went on a 3-year sabbatical, really exploring, what I could do with my life. Mm-hmm. So from there, I was going back and forth, back to the US as a tech entrepreneur, as a business person, and then back to the Philippines doing nonprofit work. And so it was actually during that back and forth experience that I met Rexy, my co-founder. And Rexy, if I was a West Coast Filipino, I went to the University of California. He went to Brown University on the East Coast, and he founded a nonprofit that looked for promising Filipino students around the country to go back on these 2-month-long internships in the Philippines. So Filipino students from Harvard, Stanford, Georgetown, Brown, University of Toronto, University of London. And the stories reminded me of the same life-changing experience that I went through in college. Instead of working for Amazon, they would reject that job offer and attempt to start an AI company in Manila. Or instead of being an investment banker in New York, they would come back home to the Philippines to help a family business. And so it was through that work that we caught the attention of the Philippine ambassador to the US. His name is Ambassador Jose Quisha. And having dinner with him, he talked about the importance of digital transformation. And
wait, how did you end up having dinner with the ambassador in the first place?
It was at the Philippine consulate. So at the Philippine consulate in Los Angeles, Ambassador Quisha was doing a program where he was trying to connect Filipino Americans back home to the US.
I see.
And when he heard my story, we went to Koreatown and had Korean barbecue. And it was actually that conversation where he was talking about.
Wait, you went to Koreatown? Why didn't you go to Daly City or the equivalent, right? And eat Pinoy food?
Well, the consulate in the Los Angeles. So the consulate in Los Angeles is actually in Koreatown. That's actually one of my dreams, to actually move it to historic Filipino town, but they need a building. So someone needs to fund that building. So I don't know.
I see. Okay. Anyway, I digress. Please go ahead.
Yeah. And so with that conversation with the Philippine ambassador, he made an argument that instead of just doing nonprofit work, the stuff that I do in the US in technology and entrepreneurship, what would actually happen if I did that in the Philippines? And the technology jobs that we create in the Philippines, maybe that might have more of an impact than the nonprofit work that I'm doing in the Philippines. And that question, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation, so that when I talked to Rexy, who I was helping with this nonprofit, he was also sharing that, hey, maybe there's some limitations to the nonprofit work that I've been doing. And he was also sharing an interest in starting a business in the Philippines. So when we both made that commitment to think of something to move to the Philippines to start, that's when we went full on Avengers Initiative and found other Filipinos, Hulk in New York. We went to San Francisco looking for Black Widow. We went to Los Angeles looking for Thor, and we all moved to the Philippines to start Kumu. So the founding story was really about that, this background in nonprofit work. Now, to answer your question about what is Kumu, it's a social entertainment platform. But it didn't start out as a social entertainment platform, and I think we'll talk about this in some of the other questions. And I don't know do I answer this later about the pivot, but what I could talk about now is we've built a participatory two-way way of building community in a way that we're more about social entertainment. So less about social media and less about social network, but creating a safe space of positivity, safety, and acceptance, where on one end, a content creator, because it's 100% live, you don't have you're not pretending your life is perfect on Instagram, or you're not curating your life like on YouTube. There's something real, raw, and authentic about being yourself. And you don't hide behind a keyboard and engage in toxic behaviors. You're just a lot nicer as a person and more real in 100% environment. But the business model is the way you recognize the content. Viewers aren't just giving you're not just recognizing content with a like, you're not recognizing content with a view, you're recognizing content and you're sending a microtransaction in real time. So it's very similar to a street performer, digital busking. If someone's playing the guitar and you like the content, you put a coin or a dollar bill in their guitar case or in their cup. But we do that digitally hundreds of thousands of times. And now it's a multi-million-dollar a month business.
Okay, so Adlin, the managing director for Never Malaysia, has about 20 guitars. I'm sure he would love to showcase his talent one day. So I think after this session, let's set up an account for Adlin one day. Let's see how much money he can generate with his following. But anyway, I love it, right? This is a digital busking platform in a sense, right? But it extends way beyond just music, right? What are the kinds of things that happen on the platform besides music?
Yeah, so music is one particular one that we're having is reality TV content. You know, we just launched our second season now. So Big Brother Philippines is actually the most popular reality TV show in the country. But the problem with free-to-air television is you're just watching the content. Whereas on Kumu, and with the owners of the Big Brother franchise, this is the first ever time we had 24/7 live streams in the kitchen, in the bathroom, or that's not allowed. The kitchen, the living room, the pool area. All the auditions happen on Kumu, and all the challenges and the way that you vote people off actually happens on Kumu and less on the free-to-air television. So we use free-to-air television as a way to get that mass thing, but then the only way that you could create community is by really building those communities and pushing people into those interests. So reality TV, gaming, or sports has been great, volleyball players. It's just a really great place to build community. Mechanical keyboards, cosplaying, there's a community of folks who paint Game of Thrones miniatures.
Yep. And it's to me, it's, looking at this from afar, right? Amazing that you managed to disrupt the traditional media business, right? And now it's the old guard, right, that are going to you saying, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this, right?
Yeah, I think, one of the largest media conglomerate in the country, is one of our investors. And, they're responsible for the Big Brother franchise. And it was crazy because there was a situation where it really didn't make financial sense for them to launch their next movie and direct Kathy Garcia. She is the highest grossing box office film director of all time. Two of her movies, Hello, Love, Goodbye, and The House of Us, are still at the top. The only two movies that ever beat her were Marvel, The Avengers Endgame, and Infinity War were the only two movies that beat her. And so what we did is we put together a contest where live streamers who earned the most virtual gifts would get parts in the movie, or live streamers who got the most virtual gifts would be on the soundtrack. And when you consolidated that funding, and because we were going to fund the whole movie, the entire script of her next blockbuster film is about two couples who find friendship and love on Kumu. Yeah, it's a Star Cinema film that we 100% financed through the virtual gifts. And based off of our conversations on Netflix and putting that movie on Netflix, you see a really interesting growth loop there where we're able to take now Kumu IP onto platforms like Netflix and just get a lot of eyeballs that way.
So is this art imitating life or life imitating art? Or maybe a bit of both, right?
Yeah, it's something very similar is happening with Wattpad as well, where we're noticing that a lot of the most popular movies or the most popular TV series are happening on Wattpad novels that are getting huge readership. And so we're utilizing our communities who love Wattpad to create and finance. So yeah, it's a really interesting time. It's a new way of doing media and building community.
And you're up to how many community members now, as of the last count?
So right now, it just keeps on growing. I mean, I know that we have over 10 million users who visit the app around 60 million times a month. I know that the average time spent per daily user is about 63 minutes per day. But the difference between, say, us and a short form video platform like our friends over at TikTok is that 63 minutes on TikTok is like, hundreds of pieces of content, whereas 63 minutes on Kumu is maybe 2 or 3 streams max, because you're engaging with that person. And our follow back rate is 61 to 62%. So for example, on platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, it's usually usually you see like 1 million follows, but that person who has 1 million followers will only follow back like 50, 60 people or something like that. Our ratio, no, it's 61%. Like there's a really high follow back ratio because it's all about building communities and following each other and spending quality time with each other, which is a lot different than one to many.
And you have people from all over the world tuning in, right? Maybe you can share a little bit about what your audience looks like. Where do they live? What do they do?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we have actually now 3 total addressable markets in our global population. So there's the Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, Middle East. This is a global Filipino with the hope of coming back home. They're usually sending money back home to their spouse or their children. Whereas in more Western countries that we've seen in Australia, US, Canada, and the UK, these are people who have migrated and have they're not planning on coming back home. So they're usually sending money back home to their parents or to their siblings. And so based off of those 2 total addressable markets, that's how we've been able to really become the first Filipino app to be the number 4 highest grossing social app in Canada, number 5 in Australia, top 10 in the Middle East, number 8 in Norway, which is crazy, right? But the 3rd total addressable market, which is really interesting, which is reminding us of, say, K-pop, is the group of African-American women. There's multiple communities of African-American women in the South who follow SB19, which is a Filipino pop band. I just saw a rapper in New York, all non-Filipinos, on Kumu because they're doing their YouTube video about Jollibee fried chicken, or the Welsh girls who do their TikToks about their followings on Kumu because they're practicing their Tagalog and their usernames are all in Tagalog, even though they're all 100% British. It's a really interesting thing. I've seen 6 people now who have tattooed our logo on them, and it's a really interesting phenomenon. I mean, we don't know how big it is yet because we're still digging into it. But I'm going to Las Vegas for our first convention for our North American users, and I did notice that quite a bit of them are actually not Filipino. They're all just fans of Filipino culture. So we're gonna go visit them, and there's people flying in from Canada, those African-American women from the South, they're all flying in. So I'm gonna spend some time getting to know them and understand why they love Kumu so much. So
take note, Adlin, you too can have a global audience one day with your 20 guitars. Okay, at this point, right, I'd like to now focus a little bit on your scaling journey, right? This is, after all, a program that was created for the Scale Up program in Malaysia, right? So we have a number of people in the Scale Up program listening in, and I think they'd really love to learn from you how you did it, right? So let's start with, my first point, I guess, would be you didn't set out to create what you have today.
No,
right?
absolutely not.
Maybe you can talk about what you set out to do and then what happened. and then how did you get?
Because here's the thing:
people, including your investors, to go along with this sort of radically different direction.
Absolutely, and this is so critical as an entrepreneur, right? This entrepreneur to entrepreneur talk is on a product market fit. So the market looked so on the market side, very interesting, right? 100 million people, mostly young, billions of dollars being spent on internet infrastructure, and Chinese manufacturers creating iPhone 7s for the cost of $100 because of Vivo and Oppo and Huawei and Xiaomi. So now you have this environment of that. And so for us, we're like, okay, based off this thesis, let's build something that let's build a consumer internet business prioritizing the voices of an entire market, right? So we saw like what WeChat was able to do in China, or Kakao, I think is our goals, right? They built a multi-app ecosystem that really prioritizes and become the premier consumer internet business in Korea. And then we saw Indonesia and Gojek. And we saw what really inspired us was VNG Corporation building a multi-app, multi-billion-dollar ecosystem in Vietnam. So based off that research, their hero app was the messenger app. So we're like, okay, why don't we launch Kumu, the messenger app? Kumu short for Kumusta. And this is why it's so important to leave enough room for your community to define your product, because as smart as we all were, we got full on Infinity War. I mean, it was like, you know, when Thanos snapped his fingers, like that's how it felt when we launched the messenger app. It was like, dang, you guys are that smart and you guys launched a crappy Viber. You know, it was like a really crappy Viber. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose everything. And we almost did multiple times at that stage, right? You're like, I don't even have enough money to pay my employees right now. And we're a messenger app. And you know, what's crazy is it was an intern. So, right, you look at the data and you're looking at the cohort data, the usage stats. And she found something, our intern, Mika Reyes, who now just started her own company and we're so proud of her. She might actually be a future endeavor entrepreneur, she noticed high retention rates amongst people who were utilizing a feature that was not even the core part of the app. It was a live streaming. Live streaming was like a thing that we thought was like fun, and we just put it in the background. And she picked up the phone. We all picked up the phone based off of her urging, and we started talking to these users and realized, oh my gosh, Kumu is a live streaming app. And it reminded us of another pivot. You know, Bourbon, this team who built a messenger app in San Francisco, they were so smart, but they timed their product wrong. No one cared about the messenger check-in app Bourbon. But when they also noticed that there were communities forming around this photo sharing and photo editing feature, that's when they realized we're going to pivot and become a photo editing, photo sharing app. And they rebranded themselves as Instagram. And then that's when the app took off. So same thing for us. It was through that analysis and talking to the users. Again, when we're talking about blitzscaling, I would rather build a product that 100 people love than what 1,000 people kind of like. And that's the danger of putting too much money into growth and really starting at that stage where, you know, we're in the condo and we have the whiteboard in my living room stage. And it was at that point where, you know, it was a big risk, but at the same time, you know, everyone was so pessimistic about the Philippine internet at that time, but because of the way that we engineered the product and knew that we could operate a live streaming app based off of the bare minimum of the internet at that particular point in time in 2018, we just decided to pivot as a live streaming app because that's where the retention curve was way higher compared to the messenger app. And it was the ability to build communities around that, around this retention curve of live streaming that we pivoted into live streaming, and then boom, that's when.
Yeah, but psychologically, that's a tough thing to do, right? I mean, you've set out to do this one thing, you've poured your resources, you've configured everything to do this one thing, right? And then there's some research that's come back and says, well, I think there might be a better thing. How do you go from, okay, we see some interesting data that tells us to do something else, and then actually go and do it? Right. I mean, how did you and your partners talk about, guys, we gotta completely redo what we're doing?
Well, that's the funny thing, because remember, we didn't say that we were a live streaming, we were a social entertainment platform, social. And at the end of the day, it was always about community. And so when you're leaving enough room for your community to define your product, they're the ones who told us that this thing that we built wasn't a messenger app. You know, and so by listening to the community and just looking at the data, we're like, wow, look at the people are spending 60 to 80 hours a week on Kumu utilizing the live streaming feature.
Yeah.
Like that's like, they're like living on the app. You know what I mean?
So how long did it take before you realized, man, we hit the jackpot?
6 months. So
6 months.
We launched beta in February. And we pivoted in August. So that's why when we say it's our 3-year anniversary, technically we're 3.5 years old. It's just that we're celebrating our pivot to becoming a live streaming app in August. So we're technically 3 years old, but we're really 3.5 years old.
Mm-hmm. And what was the go-to-market strategy, right? With this live streaming app, how did you go and acquire customers? What was the thinking back then?
Well, at the time, I think Malaysia actually, there was a live streaming game show called Do It in Malaysia. It used to be called, it was called Pedro here in the Philippines. And we had a very similar product where you would live stream like a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire type format, where you would actually try to answer all 10 questions correctly, and then you get a prize at the end. And so one of the reasons why that was so beneficial for our customer acquisition strategy, and a lot different than just being a game show 100% of the time, is it created a growth hack to get people to try to play this game. And then in our scripting, we would push people into live streaming communities. That was one of our first kind of hacks. And then after that, as we started realizing the importance of the communities, we then started focusing on key categories and key influencers that we knew could actually migrate their people over. So a lot of it was like with YouTubers and things like that. And also with ABS-CBN's help, we were able to really start promoting particular influencers to onboard them. In that case, that YouTuber, her name was Alex Gonzaga. But yeah, I think the game show was the first kind of growth hack. And then secondly, were the influencers that we knew were going to be relatable. Because not all influencers, if you're an Instagrammer with like 12 million followers, you might actually not do well on Kumu, because if you go live, you know, there's a reason why you're on Instagram, because you could pretend your life is perfect. But on Kumu, you could clearly see if the person's, you know, being fake or whatever, and you just have to be completely relatable. So we noticed that radio personalities actually did very well on Kumu during those early stages, because they're so used to just being themselves in a live format that, you know, folks like Casey Montero and one of his co-hosts who got in trouble a lot, I think his name is Mo, you know, those folks, you know, we had first. So, yeah.
Quick question, right? TikTok, right? TikTok, as we know, is huge in many parts of the world.
Yes.
When you think about what you guys are doing, how do you defend yourselves against the likes of TikTok? Right here.
Yeah, well, TikTok's it's so great. So our co-lead for our Series B is SIG, and SIG is actually widely known as the lead seed investor in Yang Jimin. And when they put $3 million into TikTok, it actually positioned them, to this day, they are the largest outside shareholder in TikTok. That $3 million investment is now well worth over $50 billion. And, you know, we've had, and I can't say who, so we're about to do a historic Series C with another key investor of TikTok too. And, okay, sure. So TikTok is really good from an algorithmic short form video attention span. I would say TikTok is more like Instagram and YouTube combined. It's a much, much more effective way of capturing attention span if you want to get down an algorithmic driven hole. So you imagine it's a YouTube compressed down into 20, 30 seconds, but then that social layer of influencer that Instagram has. It's like the perfect killer app for wasting at least an hour of your time with your thumb and your eyes. That's TikTok. Whereas for Kumu, it's more two-way and it's more community focused. We've had some really awkward conversations with TikTok about helping them with their live streaming, because I'm like, wait, what's happening? So anyways, but what I can say is we're 100% from a product perspective, it's community focused. And so because it's so community focused and not more around, you know, attention span one to many, that's one of our biggest moats. But the second moat is on content. Because of our hyperlocal approach, even TikTok even said that no matter how big we get into the Philippines, we'll never prioritize local content. Our people go viral because they're copying stuff that's happening in Western markets and international markets. It's 90% international, 10% local content. Yeah. And at most, if they go in hyperlocal, it'll be 30% local, 70% international. For us, we're 99% Filipino, and we're unapologetic about our Filipino-ness.
Okay, great. Listen, we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about how you think about hiring, how you think about fundraising, and then we'll end up by talking about what's next for you guys, right?
Yeah.
So hiring. I mean, Kumu's all about authentic connections, right? And a lot of the folks in your community are millennials and Gen Z. How do you think about who are the right kinds of people to work at Kumu, right? And then just as importantly, what do you do to keep them, in Kumu? Because I think some of these folks are notoriously fickle, right? With respect to careers and jobs and all that. So maybe share with our scale up cohort, how do you think about hiring?
Well, from a hiring perspective, I think, well, number one, there has to be like a lot of trust, and we're actually very generous when it comes to, compensation, those types of things, but it's all performance driven. It's all about really being able to perform, and also just be really easy to work with. If you look at the team, for example, Rexy, he's like my freaking, I call him like a corporate soulmate, if you will. There's so much trust in the leaders. You run a decentralized I highly recommend for anyone who's a CEO here is reading The Outsiders. And if you look at the CEO performance of the top performing CEOs on the market, it's not just like the Steve Jobs style or the Elon Musk personality driven types. It's these super simple, super decentralized, hire great people and get out of the way type of leaders who have specialized in capital allocation to increase shareholder value in a way that's just completely unparalleled. And so when finding those right leaders, then the strategy is really able to get a lot more cleaner. Like, for example, on the growth side, an Endeavor company, Figs, their senior vice president of marketing and growth is my best friend. And he joined them at the Series B when they were doing $7 million a year in revenue. And he helped grow them to a $300 million a year business, $5 billion listing on the New York Stock Exchange, that instead of retiring, he joined the team as the winter soldier, my best friend, to help us really oversee that. And ever since we brought him on board, our growth and that whole strategy has been amazing. Same thing with Crystal, our chief product officer. She oversaw growth and business intelligence at Gojek. And when she joined at their Series B and left when it became a decacorn, she's been completely transformational when it comes to bringing over the Gojek mafia. Some of the technologists that we're bringing on board are some of the best people that Gojek's ever had. And I think that you also pay attention to the network effects, that the mafia effects. Like when Tamago, this live streaming platform that went out of business, when we onboarded the country manager, that person, he brought in the A team of all the top performing people. When we brought in Crystal, right? She's bringing in all the top people from Gojek. Same thing with our e-commerce strategy. When we brought in the key person from Shopee, all the key people from Shopee that they worked with came over. Same thing with ABS-CBN when we brought in Paulo, right? So I think there's something key there. Is it's not just the key leader, but also recognizing the communities of people that they positively impacted in their respective, because when they join, they bring the A team too.
So you're doing something that I think is really important, right? It's relatively new, but I think it's highly important, which is you are looking around the world for talent. I think many of our earlier stage companies don't even think about that. So maybe you can just share how you think about, sourcing global talent. How do you actually do that? How do you prize somebody out of a extremely lucrative, sometimes cushy job, right? Working for well-known brands.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, one of the main things is just really having the vision that's big, having a product vision and a company vision that's big enough that they could actually see their own personal vision inside of it. There's, especially in the Philippines, there's been kind of a running joke about, like a real unicorn coming out of the Philippines, or like, something like that. I'm not going to say anything like that because I respect everyone's hustle. And I think I'm just saying that's what a lot of these people say. And so there's a lot of motivation for Filipinos abroad to actually be a part of something that they truly believe could be a company of a lot of impact. And so when we looked at the data, we started noticing, and we shared this data with the people that were applying, is that, oh, wow, let me give you an example. Ateneo de Manila University has a particular program called Management Engineering. And we noticed people coming out of the 2015 graduating class were doing very well in Kumu. And so then we started digging into the 2015 class and ended up onboarding 7 people from that class. And it was crazy. It was like one of the top data scientists at Grab in Singapore quit his job and joined us. One of the top product people at Instacart, multi-billion-dollar business, same class. One of the top people from Uber, one of the top business intelligence people at Thumbtack, another unicorn. Ryan, who is at Harvard Business School, went there too. Another person at Singapore Management University getting their MBA. They all are classmates. It's crazy. It's so weird how when you look at the data and you start sharing that data, they get a sense of like, yeah, I want to be a part of this, you know.
And was budget ever an issue for you guys? I mean, how did you, how were you able to afford people who are high flyers? I'm sure many of our scale-up folks are going to be interested in that.
So it depends on stage, right? Pre-Series A, that was mostly like people who are very close to us and we're driven by, the vision. We were still a little bit light on the stock options, but, people in the Philippines, we were able to find just to kind of get us to that Series A level. Now at the Series A level, we were getting a little bit more professional and being able to tell the company story and then offering some stock options and those types of things. And then Series B and beyond, I think that's when we started being a lot more aggressive on salaries and those types of things. And then now at Series C, it's just, we're just trying to hire the best people.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit, since we're talking about Series A, Series B, let's talk about your fundraising journey, right? I mean, you guys have done something very significant, which is really the first proper Series B in the entire Philippines, right? How'd you get there? And what advice do you have for people earlier in their journey, right? When you think about who do you want in your cap table, what are the things to look out for? Are there any things that you regret now, right? Looking back.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry. The other thing was significant, by the way. I just have to share this in case you don't bring it up. Is that you guys were able to get some of the big conglomerates all together in the same company as investors, right? That is not an easy thing to do. Right? That's was actually very clever of you guys. Somehow you were able to pull it off to have all the big guys together in the same cap table.
Absolutely. I think it all starts with the FOMO, right? So you have, at the idea stage when it was just a deck, the friends and family stage. And then from friends and family stage, Liza Golconway was the first person who invested in us. And what's really interesting is she was interested in investing in us because prior to that, at the friends and family stage, we had a famous venture capitalist, his name is Dado Banatao, agreed to become our advisor. And I was only able to get him as an advisor because he was giving away his advisory services as a nonprofit, like a fundraising dinner. And when she saw that Dado was an advisor, then she's like, hey, I want to invest. And then when she invested, then ABS-CBN is like, well, if Liza's investing, I'm going to invest. And then when the Ayala family saw that, or Kickstart saw that ABS and Liza Golconway were in, then, it just kind of started steamrolling. And then now we have C Gentry Fund, which is the grandchildren of the C family. So now you have 3 of the top 5 wealthiest families on our cap table. And on top of the 3 of the top 5, we also have the largest media conglomerate in the country. So that's 4 very, very powerful families who have helped us in the thing. But again, I didn't know anyone, right? It all started with one person. And it was because my co-founder, Rexy, helped write a book for Liza. Because Liza's, in addition to being the 3rd wealthiest family in the country, she owns a very large media company, and one of it is publishing. And so she was so impressed with Rexy on publishing that book, she offered him a job. And he said, oh, no, I can't take this job because I'm going to do a startup. And she's like, oh, you're a startup? Tell me about it. And then he sent the deck. And then she said, hey, would you be interested in an investment? Cool. It's just crazy like that. You just have to kind of go out there and do that. So it just kind of all builds up over time. But for fundraising, I would say friends and family, when it's just an idea, for the seed round, it was like the business idea. So friends and family, actually, no, friends and family, they're investing in you. So the founder. And then seed, it was really the business idea. Series A was the traction. Series B was the product, investing in the product market fit. And then Series C and beyond is just like growth, 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 growth.
Okay, well, I think we're running out of time. So before we go into Q&A, I guess I want to focus on the future now a little bit, right? What do the next 5 years look like for you guys? I mean, you did mention earlier that, there's a Series C coming that's imminent. I think that will be kind of groundbreaking for a country. And I think the entire ecosystem will benefit from having that happen. But, what does the next 5 years look like for you guys?
Well, according to that term sheet, it has to be an IPO. So yeah, it would be an IPO or an exit within the next 5 years, for sure. I mean, the type of money that we're raising, shame on us if we didn't put ourselves in a position to be IPO-able. And one of the reasons why that's key, especially on a bigger stock market, is that the implication means we have to be a world-class execution company. Our accounting standards, business processes, vision, product, technology, all across the board is executing at a world-class level. And so, I guess how we say it internally is like the Philippines doesn't have to be known as a place that prints, another Miss Universe or another boxer like Manny Pacquiao. Would we be able to, as the most social media heavy friendly country in the world, what would a product on top of that market look like and how it could impact the rest of the world that way? And so based off of that narrative, we've had a lot of investor interest in that. Okay, cool. We'll give you enough funding to be either the #1 consumer internet business in the Philippines. And if you could do that, the potentiality of replicating this in other markets. In either case, it's a multi-billion-dollar outcome. And for us, that's not the motivation. The motivation is the fact that that also means that you have, because right now we have 1,500 content creators who earn a full-time income on the app. The implication is we would have to have more than 10 to 20,000 full-time content creators on the app. And that would also have to mean that we'd have to employ more than 1,000 people based off of our current headcount of 500. And so it's those types of things and that type of responsibility and realization that really drives us to that multi-billion-dollar valuation, not because we're motivated by that.
Great. I would be remiss, right? As somebody who's been with Endeavor now for 6.5 years, I would be remiss if we didn't end by talking about the multiplier effect, right? We have big expectations for you and Rexy, right? That one day you will become the big bubbles in the ecosystem, and that because of your work, 1,000 flowers will bloom in the ecosystem. You and I have had a number of conversations about this. Maybe just share some of your sort of high-level thoughts about the ecosystem going forward and how you see yourselves as part of that. One thing that's really cool is that you guys are part of this this project called Sinigang Valley, right? Yeah. So maybe you can talk about Sinigang Valley and some of the other things you see yourselves doing with the ecosystem, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're all consolidated in this neighborhood in Makati, one of the business districts here, and I remember walking around, and right next door to our neighborhood is another neighborhood called Poblacion, which is really known for nightclubs and things like that. And it's a very creative area. And I noticed that bordering our business district is a narrow street that I thought reminded me of, because I'm from a place called Silicon Beach, which is in Santa Monica, Venice area, where Snapchat is and YouTube LA and Facebook LA is. And then prior to that, again, I was at Silicon Valley in San Francisco. But this particular creative neighborhood reminded me of the Venice neighborhood where Snapchat was at. So instead of high rises, it would just be a cultural corridor, just taking over building after building. And, long story short, one of our investors had also said like, hey, we have a speakeasy here. And it was during that time that we were having drinks with them, talking about this random idea of launching a neighborhood to uplift the technology ecosystem of the Philippines. Rexy, my co-founder, he had jokingly called it Sinigang Valley, and it just stuck. It just made so much sense. We thought it was funny as a joke, but then the more we started thinking about it, the soup, if you're familiar with Filipino cuisine, sinigang is made up of a bunch of different things. It's sweet, or it's got a sour taste to it. It's savory. It's got vegetables. It's got pork in there. And just thinking about our tech ecosystem like this bowl of soup made us realize how cool would it be if we physically showed what that sinigang would be, the funding, the startups, the enablers, all that, the creativity, all in a neighborhood that resembled that soup. And yeah, it just kind of, it's so weird because it was just like just a joke, and then now it's I just saw there was an Esquire article that just published yesterday talking about it. It's just crazy.
Yep, I think your offices are almost completely done, right? Or are they?
Yeah, so we committed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings that we're going to be in.
And then there's a bunch of other folks joining in, right? There's a couple of venture capital companies. I think Endeavor is going to have a little space.
Endeavor will have a little space there. I think Open Space Ventures is going to open up a little thing there. Golden Gate Ventures, Gentry Fund, Kubo Idea Space, several Y Combinator backed startups.
Awesome.
Yeah. The founder.
Okay, well, we're very excited about the future. We're very excited about Kumu and its continued journey towards success. At this point, I think I'd like to open up the floor to Q&A. I see some questions in the chat. I'm just going to go and read these things in order, if you don't mind. So we have one question. See, these are from members of the Scale Up cohort. Maran from Doc on Call. Question is, what are your tips for blitz scaling outside your own market? Right. So Kumu does a lot of business, elsewhere. What are your tips for blitz scaling outside your own native market?
Well, actually, that was our underlying magic. Was so this is why it's so important to really have a deep understanding of your TAM. Remember, I was talking about 3 total addressable markets in our global market outside of the Philippines, and 70% of our revenue actually happens outside of the Philippines. And that's super important because a lot of people keep on saying, oh, is the Philippine market big enough? The Philippine market big enough? But if you multiply the 11 or 12 million Filipinos around the world by the respective GDP per capita of the United States, of Australia, of Singapore, of Hong Kong, you could actually argue that that total addressable market is actually just as big, or if not larger, than the entire GDP of the Philippines. And so when doing that, again, it's an exercise in really understanding your market. That how cool is it, right? As the customer service capital of the world, we're able to really engage homegrown, quality, organic content creators in the Philippines, entertaining and building friendships with global Filipinos who spend on average $100 a month on the app. Do you see what I'm saying? It's very similar to the same type of economics of why there's so many call centers here. Yeah. I would call it call center friendship, and the impact of someone who spends $100 on the app to the person here in the Philippines is so much more than the $100 that they would spend on other pieces of content back home in the US. Okay, next question is from Huang from Blue Hen. How do users in Southeast Asia differ from users in developed markets like Australia and Canada in terms of media consumption, usage of social commerce? Do you see significant differences? Well, for sure, the users in the Philippines just use it so much more. I haven't talked too much. Now, we do have a community of what we call the Board Filipino Housewives of Malaysia. A lot of them are in KL. We also have a fast-going group in Kumu, Thailand. But again, those are probably use cases. I don't know if it's general, but what we have noticed is that Filipinos, they see, again, it's one of the reasons why we built a social app, is because indicators that showed that Filipinos utilize social media so much. So what would it look like if you built a product around that? So in the context of other markets, I can't really respond too well. The advice I would give though is, what are people of respective countries known for globally? Yeah. And then build a product around that. Well, I'd like to say that the Philippines is a nation of ADDs, right? Addicted to digital devices. Yeah, but if you look at it, right, it's just like, so why would Facebook or Instagram or TikTok know how to do this? What would actually look like if you built? It's the same thing with Jollibee, right? Jollibee is a a fast food company that is one of the few companies that beat McDonald's in the home country, right? And if you look at that, what are those respective businesses that you could beat the international local player, you know, in your respective market? And so that's why Jollibee is a huge inspiration for us, because Jollibee is unapologetic about its Filipino-ness, that it was able to really beat and fend off the McDonald's business, you know. So.
That's right. Okay, next question is from Mike Chu. He's the founder of PTT Outdoor. When you scale as fast as you guys have, what tends to break? What breaks when you scale so big and so fast?
Yeah, so that's important in technology, right? The being able to recognize when you have to rewrite, the refactoring, you know, having close relationship with AWS, right? We're one of the top 100 companies that they're focused on right now. And so it's just really being able to make sure, because I got to be completely honest, we've been breaking the app a lot this past week. You know, this PBB thing, some other top celebrities and those types of things. And if you don't have your servers ready, or if you don't have that infrastructure ready, it could actually be one of the biggest limitations to your growth. And so I think it's really important that you also have the right tech leadership and also the right communication amongst your leaders and with the product team and with the growth team to be able to recognize when the technology can handle it. Because if you don't have that right plan in place, it's going to slow the company down, the whole thing down.
And of course, in addition to technology breaking, you have organizational structures breaking down, right?
Yeah, the processes, I think that, you know, myself as a leader, you know, things like operating margin and OKRs, that was not in my vocabulary 3 years ago when I first started the app. You know, one thing I want to encourage everyone in this group is that I was in 3 years ago, I've never built an app before, guys. Like, seriously, like I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just knew that I was really passionate about the community. Yeah. You know, and to build a several $100 million value business in less than 3 years, like it's not, I just want to encourage everyone in this room that I'm winging it. Like I'm figuring it out as I go.
Yeah.
I'm reading books all the time. Like that Outsiders book, it's because our growth equity person is like, hey man, read this. And I'm learning about capital allocation to increase shareholder value. I'm learning about operating margins. I'm learning about cash flow management on the fly. I didn't even know what these things meant last year.
Okay, well, I wrote down.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. Like I've heard of it, but I didn't really worry about it as much as I do now because we're about to raise so much money. But I think that it's really important to that. Like, don't worry. Just focus on being the best version of yourself. You know, the hard thing about hard things, that book was a lifesaver, right? Really managing between your minds, because there's going to be scaling that happens inside your head. You know, like this mind, I had hair when I started this app. I had hair. I don't have hair anymore.
But it looks cool, man. It looks cool. Hey, Fira, how much more time do we have? Because we have a few more questions.
Yes, I think we can go with the questions in the chat, Manny, actually. There's 2 questions in the chat.
Okay, so we have one from Judge from the Philippines. Interesting how all major decisions such as the pivot and even which university to approach for recruitment are all data-driven. How do you make sure the company is in a position to make data-driven decisions?
You just have to track everything. Data takes the debate out of it. The problem is sometimes you'll come up with someone who's very charismatic and can argue very well. But if they can't back it up with the data, then we can't really like go behind it. I mean, we track everything from, you know, time of day, you know, where you have to track everything on the app, you know, the login page, the size of the login page, how many minutes they're here, how many minutes they're there, how many on the profile page, and incrementally just, you know, continue to just focus on the key. Well, for us, it's retention, retention, high activation rate,
Yeah.
and high paying user rate. But again, it's all data driven. I mean, we can't make a call without it. I mean, if you say something without data, like literally you're on your way to getting kicked out of our company.
Right. So I imagine part of it is the culture you're trying to build, right?
Yes.
So a clear message that, if you don't have the data, then maybe.
Yeah, because Endeavor, Steve Kessel, the right hand of Jeff Bezos at Amazon, we met him through our ISP. He has been critical in terms of, one, single-threaded leadership, and two, we've adopted this 6-page memo process that Amazon uses.
Oh, wow.
Really force the leaders that if you're going to make a hard call, make a 6-page memo so that all the other leaders can actually have a deep thinking discussion around why you're going to do that.
Fantastic.
Why would we? Yeah. So those types of things. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, actually a follow-up question to that is, so is the data, collection and analysis, is that a shared function, or is there a data czar?
Yeah, business intelligence. So yeah. So one of those graduates from Ateneo, 2015 ME, was a senior business data analyst over at Uber and then Thumbtack as well. And he is our head of business intelligence, and he's just been amazing.
Okay. Last question here, right? And this is from Teng at Care Concierge. Let's see. 2 questions, actually. What's your bottom line in running an open platform where you have no control over the content, right? What's your bottom line in running an open platform where you have no control over content? And then secondly, your top 3 no-nos, right? Things you would never, ever do. Okay.
Yeah, actually, it all consolidates to our policy on content moderation. Safety, positivity, and acceptance are the 3 core values that allows us to differentiate ourselves. See, we're not a social media and we're not a social network. We're social entertainment. And so I always say Disneyland. If you've ever been to Disneyland, people don't appreciate how strict the security is at Disneyland. If you show up to Disneyland, they're not going there complaining about the government. They're not going to Disneyland and looking dangerous. The moment someone looks dangerous in the parking lot, you get kicked out of Disneyland, right? And so by focusing on being a social entertainment platform and having core values like safety, positivity, and acceptance, it allows us to be unapologetic, because anything that lies outside of our policy of safety, positivity, and acceptance, right? No politics, no cursing, no nudity, no drugs, no drinking, no smoking. We can actually kick people out because they know that this is not Facebook, this is not Instagram, this is not TikTok. If you do this, like Disneyland, you will get kicked out. Have you seen someone smoke a cigarette or drink openly alcohol at Disneyland? No, and it's the same thing for us. And by doing that, it's not a technology differentiator, it's a cultural differentiator that really makes us a lot different than other platforms.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour here. I think that's all the time we have for questions. So I guess to close, let me just say that for me, some of the takeaways, right? Thanks very much, Roland, right, for sharing your story. Some of my takeaways, number 1, be a fast and quick learner, right? Always open to new things and to advice from people that have done, bigger things before we have. Number 2, hire well, right? And hire from wherever, right? Hire the right people wherever they live. The last thing is the importance of data, right? And getting that right from the get-go to drive your decision-making. So with that, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on what you've achieved so far. And we await with bated breath, right, for you to become a big, giant bubble in the Philippine ecosystem. And hopefully by then, Endeavor will be cool enough for you guys at Kumu.
Now, we're so grateful for Endeavor. I mean, the storytelling, and Endeavor was the one who coached us. I mean, that's actually because of Endeavor's coaching. Thank you, Kella. I was able to take that story and really use it as the best opener for our Series B. It was one of the most oversubscribed things. We had to say no to a bunch of people. And again, it's all Endeavor. We're so grateful for Endeavor. And, thank you for having me.
Thank you for letting us into your Series B.
Yeah, the next one's pretty close too. So
right. And with that, I guess I turn the floor over to you, Fira. Are you going to do the closing remarks?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Roland and Manny. I think the session itself, it was really inspiring. I think, Roland, you're just the definition of a high impact entrepreneur, right? As we've heard today in your story, that you're always dreaming big, you're at the inflection point of scaling up, and here you are today, paying it forward to all the other entrepreneurs here that we have. So I guess I'll be seeing everyone on the Kumu app, especially Manny and Adeline. I'll see you on the Kumu app after this.
Hey, definitely. Hey, Roland, you know something? You mentioned Tamago, right? I built that in Astro, so you hired my team.
Oh yeah, Astro. Yep. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Small world, man.
Thank you, Adlin.
So for the next Blitzscaling session itself, we will hear from founder of Indonesia's fastest growing SME-focused solution provider, Krishnan, founder and CEO of Bukukas. So Bukukas is a startup focused on digitalizing Indonesia's small businesses, which recently raised $50 million in Series B funding. And since their launch as a digital bookkeeping app in December 2019, they have added new features including online payments, e-commerce platform as well. They have onboarded about 6.3 million businesses so far and have a total of 3 million monthly active users. They have also annualized bookkeeping transactions to a volume of 25.9 billion USD, which is equivalent to 2.2% of Indonesia's GDP itself. So before we go, if you're all interested in the next session itself, you can look in the Zoom chat below. So we have the Google Forms where you can sign up for the next session. And before we go, we will also trigger a feedback where we will
I have one mini announcement, right? Yep. Because Chelsea will kill me if I don't mention this. So we have at Endeavor a program called Endeavor, which is focused on women in entrepreneurship. We actually have a very, very cool session coming up on September 7th at 9 a.m. Manila time, 9 a.m. KL time. And it's really focused on branding, right? So we have 3 Endeavor entrepreneurs, all women, who built these amazing businesses. One of them is Hande Schillinger, the founder of Insider, which is, I think, unicorn status already. You all know, of course, Vivi Yusuf, the co-founder of Fashion Ballet. And we have Ankiti Bose, the co-founder of Zilingo, all talking about how they think about branding. And it will be moderated by Veronica Serra, who is an Endeavor Global Board member. So all in all, a very high-powered panel of women entrepreneurs. Please come, September 7, 9 a.m. Now, if you need the details, I guess you can go bother Fira. You have the link somewhere, right, Fira?
Yes, I'll send it out as well. And it's actually a live session, so anyone can just tune into our LinkedIn page or YouTube page.
Oh, wait, Chelsea posted it, and it's in the chat. Thank you, Chelsea, for posting the link. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Manny. Thanks, Roland. I think that's about it for today. Don't want to take any more of the time. Thank you, and have a nice day, everyone.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Manny. Thanks, Roland.
Thanks, Team Malaysia. Thanks, Roland.
Bye.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you.
And good luck to all the scale-up members.